Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to episode 30 of Trail Society, brought to you by our friends over at Freetrail. I'm Corinne Malcolm.
I'm Keely Henninger, and we are joined today by a friend of the pod, Miss Danielle Snyder. Hello, Danielle. Thanks for joining us.
Hi.
We're really excited to have you back. Those of you who have been longtime listeners will hearken back to a conversation we had with Danielle this past winter, where I think
was it cold? I feel
like you were in your van in Keely's driveway. I'm pretty sure, actually. So we're happy to have you back in your van, streaming in with us. Hillary, our normal third co-host, is still off in Euroland, soaking up a few more miles in the French mountains. But before we dive into the show today, we've got to give a huge shout out to some of the brands making this show possible. And the big one being Athletic Greens. Again, Athletic Greens is my go-to green drink every morning, but it's so much more than a green drink. It's got 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced nutrients in one convenient daily serving. No more knocking all of your supplement bottles off the counter. One scoop, 8 ounces of water. It's all that I need to get my day going. And again, if you would like to try Athletic Greens, you can go to www.athleticgreens.com/Trail Society and order your first round of Athletic Greens today. And with that, it's time to talk about races. We're post UTMB week, so things are settling down only a little bit. And we're going to harken back to some stateside races this past week with the Rut. I had FOMO. It wasn't JOMO. I had FOMO not being at the Rut this past weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did too. My coach actually talked to me the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, it's like kind of down season. There's no races coming up." And I'm like, I didn't even get a season. Stop it. Like, what do you mean?
Plus, you just have to go to Arizona. Their season starts as soon as it starts to become winter. They can't compete right now. It's like 100 billion degrees. I don't understand.
To be fair, it's like 100 billion degrees everywhere.
Oh, right now too. I'm like, as I'm like sweating in my van.
Yeah, little JD needed like 3 stop breaks yesterday for some water because it was just way too hot for her on a run.
Yeah, hot and potentially smoky, depending on where you're listening from. I know that there's a chance with some northeast winds at the Seattle area. We'll be getting some smoke this weekend from stuff up by the Canadian border. And I'm just like, no, I'm not ready for smoke season.
Yeah.
And Western States is getting some fire right now too. So sending prayers and thoughts their way.
Yeah, I know it's burned across parts of the course in Michigan Bluff, and they've evacuated Michigan Bluff and Forest Hill, I think, at this point too. So sending lots of love to the trail community out in California, because that is so sad and so scary.
Mm-hmm. And beyond just sending love, midterm elections are coming up. And I want to plug Pow, who is Protect Our Winners, who is going above and beyond right now to encourage and support people to get out and vote. These are really important elections. You can easily go online and check to see your voting registration and help join the fight against the climate crisis.
Yeah, no more smoke seasons, or at least no more long smoke seasons. It definitely feels like we've gotten to a point where it is our go-to seasonal influx of insane temperatures and insane weather patterns all over the US, but all over the world more broadly. I know Europe had insane wildfires and insane heat waves this summer as well, which I don't think is very usual over there.
Mm-hmm. No, and Alaska was getting some too, which is crazy.
Yeah, they get bog fires up there too, and they're extra weird and scary. But speaking of heat, the Rut was also very hot this past weekend, and we're gonna keep pulling it around. We'll get through some results here, and then we'll dive into some stickier topics. David Sinclair, who is not on the start line for I think he's supposed to run CCC and stayed stateside, and he's basically done like a huge triple this summer, winning like a bunch of very, very respected 50Ks. Including winning the VK at the Rut this weekend. He beat out, the likes of Cam Smith, who is very, very good at going uphill, and Eli Hemming to win the VK. So it was David Sinclair, Cam Smith, and then Tyler Verman for third in the VK, a pretty competitive VK there. Anna Gibson, who's a DNF athlete, won the women's VK. And I believe that she's part of this new group of collegiate athletes who are allowed to hold sponsorships. And we should note that actually, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we do know that the women are actually doing better on this front in the NCAA. If they look at it from like a monetary standpoint, the female NCAA athletes who are allowed to bring in sponsorships now are outperforming their male counterparts as far as locking down sponsorship dollars. And Anna Gibson is one of those athletes. She's going to take a 6th year to run at the University of Washington this fall. But she's from Colorado originally and has been doing a bunch of trail and mountain running races, mostly in the Cirque series. So she ran the VK and won it this year. And she also ran the 11K at the rut as well. So staying to those shorter distances ahead of the cross country season.
Oh, that's so cool to see.
Yeah. Super, super cool to see investment into those collegiate level athletes. And they're going to rock our worlds, I think, when they graduate and come join us full time on the trail scene.
Yep, stick to the longer distances now.
Yeah. Well, we've graduated. We'll stay long.
They can my 36-year-old body's like, oh, VK, what is that?
Oh yeah, just an hour of hell, basically. They do 3 races, just like kind of Broken Arrow weekend over 3 days. They use the holiday weekend of Labor Day, and so the 25K as well. The 25K is basically the hardest part of the 50K course. It's all the fun stuff in the middle of it. Similar podium on the men's side. Cam Smith took the win. Eli Hemming was 2nd and Tyler Verman was 3rd. Though Bailey Kowalczyk, she might have had the performance of the day. I think she was something like 30 minutes behind Cam. Like she ran so fast. There's a beautiful video of her coming across the finish line and like running like through the banner and like directly into the arms of Johnny Luna Lima, her partner. Happy to have her back on the running scene. Ruby Lindquist, who I believe is another young athlete. I think she's an Alaskan. So another young gun. And then Emily Allison, Bozeman gal, rounded out the podium in 3rd. And then speaking of David Sinclair, he won the 50K and was 5 minutes under Killian's course record. Killian's had a bunch of stuff taken from him recently, despite winning UTMB. We'll talk about another record of Killian's that got broken over the weekend, but David Sinclair was the winner of the men's 50K and under Killian's course record, won by almost an hour. Drew Coco and Gabe Joyce. I think Gabe was doing the Triple Crown, so who's doing all 3 races that weekend, was 3rd. On the women's side, Jennifer Lichter, man, her stock is high. Akin to David was at Speed Goat 50K. David won Speed Goat. Jenny was 2nd after going many miles off course. She was 4th overall. She won this race last year, and that's where she kind of came onto a lot of our radars. So doubled back to defend her title there from last year, won by 30 minutes. Evie Tate was 2nd. Sarah Kais, who's from the Adirondacks area, kind of racing her way back into the scene. I feel like this season, I believe she had COVID this spring and it really kind of put her under for a while, but I think she's also joining the North Face group to some capacity. She was decked out in a North Face kit this weekend. And that'd be really exciting. That'd be a super exciting move for her if that is the case. So that was the rut. They have a great after party. They like cut mohawks and mullets into people's hair for them. And they've routinely given out free tattoos as well.
Yeah, it was like tattoos too, I think.
Yeah, mullets and tattoos. Fun. The Mikes put on a really, really great race at Big Sky. So if you're interested in some gnarly, that 25K is going to be one of the hardest 25Ks in the country. So if you want to get weird in Montana, put the rut on your calendar for next year. I've run every single distance there and it's super, super fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely adding it to my calendar. Okay.
Before we dive into some other stuff, we've got some really cool FKTs that happened over the past week. There's been a lot of action on the JMT as well. And I believe another JMT attempt is going down on the men's side right now. So we'll have an update in 2 weeks on that. Cause I think the unsupported record will have potentially 3 leaderboard changes in one season, which is pretty insane. But we said that Killian Jornet, one of the best, the GOAT, not one of the best, probably the best athlete of our generation, of our time. He lost another record over the weekend, and that was the Bob Graham round over in the UK. I actually listened to a great interview with Jack, a US-based trail runner who went over there and absolutely smashed this FKT, and they're basically just running around on these fells, which are basically just like huge grassy slopes. It's a lot of off trail running. It's a lot of awkward running. 66 miles or 42 fells, 27,000 feet of climbing. Super, super impressive, and broke Killian's record by 30 minutes.
Oof. Have you ever been over there?
I have not. And I think it would be insane.
It would be so insane. It'd be so cool to just go do the course.
Yeah.
Just to like see it, not try to go super fast right away.
Yeah. Well, the goal of it was actually to see how many fells you could run in 24 hours. And then Bob Graham, he was able to do 42 fells in 24 hours. And it was really hard to add any more to that. And so the Bob Graham round kind of became the standard route.
That makes sense.
And then it was
fells right now. I'm like, what is a fell?
What is a fell? And so it's, kind of this historic round, this route they follow to start and finish in the same spot. And they're on this big circuit essentially to tag the top of all these things. And there's kind of been, technically it's like you can get to them however you want to get to them, but there's kind of been an established route that's deemed the fastest. And that is the route that Bob Graham took. So it technically is between 63, I think, and 66 miles, depending on route finding, but really, really impressive. Jack kind of really isn't on the racing scene so much, but he's really a huge part of the FKT scene and has a bunch of stout stuff in the Northeast, including I think stuff on the Pemi Loop and the Presidential Traverse and kind of the Hut Traverse out there. So an interesting character to keep your eye on. And I would recommend his podcast interview with Finn on the Single Track podcast. If you haven't listened to it, super, super interesting guy. So that's my plug for another podcast. If you're currently listening to us.
Well, please come back.
but please come back. Go listen to the interview and then come right back here.
Yeah. Another nice FKT of the weekend was Courtney Dewalter. She absolutely smashed the previous FKT on the Collegiate Loop in Colorado. That was 160 miles east and west side of the Collegiate Peaks. And she broke both the men's and the women's past FKT. She ran around 40 hours, and the previous female record was held by Annie Hughes at around 61 hours. And Nick Peditella had the men's record at 48 hours. So she beat them by a good margin. And she had such a squad out there. What a cool little community came out to join her. I think Annie Hughes even came out to join her on it. And so that was really cool to see. Yeah,
it was super, super impressive. And she, not that long after Hard Rock, and she's setting up to run Grand Raid in end of October on La Reunion. So
right. Because after Dylan said it was the hardest thing he ever did, she said, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah, she was like, that sounds great. Yeah, it's super, super nasty. Tons of climbing and descending, and you're not allowed to use poles. So it's absolutely brutal sounding.
That's crazy.
We're big fans, so we'll be watching. But speaking of FKTs, Danielle, we talked about this last time you were on too, but you're part of the Women Who FKT community, and we kind of would love to hear kind of an update as far as, how are things going over the summer with that organization and with women and other individuals setting FKTs.
Yeah, I would love to check in about that. I mean, the big premise behind Women Who FKT is we want trails and ultras to be a welcoming place for all different kinds of women. BIPOC women, queer women, transgendered women, neurodivergent women, and non-binary athletes. We want to hold and open up space for them. And right now, we're aware of 9 women from underrepresented groups who have set FKTs since the start of this project. That is a huge step forward. And we really want to welcome anyone needing some support or wanting to be a part of a community that is trying to break down barriers. So right now, since we started, we have 58 women setting their first FKT. In the past, women have made up a third to a quarter of the FKTs, but we have exceeded that thus far. And for a month or so, we had set more FKTs. Women had set more FKTs than men. That's awesome. And then also, just to kind of add, if anyone saw the newsletter that came out from the fastest known time, they send out, I believe it's like weekly newsletters, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
And Aubrey Drake placed the first non-binary time on the board on 12 different routes. And they wrote a really great piece on understanding the struggle and how, as a society, we can support a more diverse trail community. So I definitely think it's worth the read.
Yeah, and we'll link that article in the show notes.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really cool to see that inclusion. And I think we want to just kind of vocalize that, we want to do everything we can to support that diversity and inclusion in our sport. There were some kind of mean comments or cruel comments like to the FKT social media posts about it. And that seems, like we don't stand by any of that. And hopeful that we can help educate people and center voices of people who are coming from those communities. So here for all of that.
Yeah. And in a less happy, more sorrow note, I feel like the whole running community is mourning right now for Lisa Fletcher, who was abducted during an early morning run on her usual running route and then later found murdered. And I think this has just brought up a lot of things for a lot of runners and a lot of companies. The thing I noticed right away before I even read the news article about Liza was that Strava just defaulted your privacy settings for you to the last and first 1/8 mile of your run, so that nobody can see where you're starting or ending. But I think this is this is something that needed to be done a long time ago. And I think we need to just have bigger conversations now about how to keep people safe from a privacy lens, as well as just on a running lens, because a lot of women have these struggles every single day. I know Danielle's had a lot of experiences even here in Portland, Oregon, where, we're arguably in a relatively safe area, but she had an experience in Forest Park where she was chased. And I mean, I'll let her kind of talk you through that. But in general, this is very, very common, right? And it's something we need to be aware of as a community and figure out ways to make it more achievable for women to run without having these thoughts.
I was reading something like 80% of women have been like harassed, chased, or grabbed on a run, which is like
horrifying.
Insanity. Yeah.
Horrifying.
It's just not an acceptable amount. And I think, I don't know where they got this number from, but I was reading another article that said like 60% of women have like chosen to transition to running indoors now because they don't feel safe.
Yeah, there was I'm trying to remember the database from it, but I've read the same article, and I think I've cited it in some places. But yeah, it's like people alter they alter how they dress, they alter if they're going to exercise at all. They move their running into safer locations or don't do it. And it's like, I hate this conversation. I hate having to talk about safety because we shouldn't have to have this conversation. You should feel safe when you're running. You should feel safe being outside.
Yeah. But I think the hard part is the reality. That is what we have control over right now, and as frustrated as I get about it, I'm like, that is the only way I feel any sense of control is by altering certain elements of my lifestyle to be as safe as possible. Because we can't we can educate and we can talk about it in society and we can help other people be more aware. But like right now in this moment, the thing that we as women can do and have control over is helping ourselves be more safe.
Yep. And that can be kind of being a united front. But I've had this conversation with Steven too, being like, have you ever felt afraid on a run? How about like walking home? Like what a universal experience for women who have like lived in a city or even like not even a big place. And that universal experience of like walking home from a bar and being like, I think I'm going to run home now. And, like getting your keys out and putting them between your knuckles. Like men have not had that. Most men have not had that experience. And I think I think people of color have this experience. I think transgender individuals have this experience, non-binary individuals, women have this experience. And it's like, it's hard to explain to someone who's never felt unsafe in their surroundings, what it's like to question, just to be running by yourself and to see another individual and have to immediately kind of put your guard up and wonder like, am I safe around this person? Like, do I need to move to the other side of the street? Do I need to change my pattern? Like it's that's like a really sad, real, but a very real conversation that many of us have had to have with our significant others or with our community members. I'm tired of it.
Yeah. I think it's challenging too, because it doesn't really matter if the person's intentions are innocent. Because of these experiences, I'm automatically, to protect myself, assuming that this person isn't safe. And it's like, I have these experiences a lot because I do a lot of solo adventures, and like I will, after 20 miles, come up and there will be someone there. And my automatic reaction is like, how can I keep myself safe? And they could be completely harmless, but same thing for like someone running too close behind you, because I have had a couple of experiences that were very jarring to me. Like if someone comes running up behind me and they're not saying something, I assume they're coming after me, and they could just be passing. So like one of the tidbits I give to people is like, announce yourself. Say, hey, I'm coming up. I'm going to pass you on the left. And it's like a really easy way to decrease someone's anxiety about being passed, especially, not knowing what they've experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Being cognizant. And I think that's hard for a lot of people, right? To like, be like, okay, like what might this other person be thinking or feeling? It's hard when you don't know everyone's past experiences. And it's kind of like, you have to just assume maybe that everyone's had a negative experience and
80%.
Yeah, but to Danielle's point, and I've felt this way a lot. Like if you're running and someone does, and you are passing someone or someone is passing you and they don't say anything and they don't get out of the way, like I'm immediately flagging them as someone that is scary. But if they like step aside, they look you in the eyes and they say like, good morning, excuse me, or something, like they acknowledge you, that makes me feel a lot better. And so I wonder if that's a baby step, where people could at least start being more cognizant of one another. It's more like just a human thing. It's like, let's treat each other a little bit more like humans, be a little bit more compassionate on the trails, and we'd all feel a little bit better.
Yeah. And I think that kind of part of the conversation going on right now is like, well, why was she running at 4:30 in the morning? Ugh. And it's like, a lot of us run at 4:30 in the morning, like policing what people are wearing, policing when they're running. Like it's all pretty irksome.
I know. I mean, I regularly run when it's dark out. And actually, I don't run, like I get comfortable and I have air shock headphones. And so like, if I'm running in town, I'll be like, oh yeah, it's like okay to wear these. And then, something else happens and I'm like, it is not okay to wear these, Danielle. Like, what are you doing? But I guess I'm like, why wouldn't you run at 4:30? I mean, like, I understand the dangers, but also across, like, I have known people who've gotten attacked in daylight. Mm-hmm. So
like very, very real. I've got a friend who was macheted on the Embarcadero in the middle of the day in San Francisco. Like,
what the fuck?
Yeah, that's okay. That like, the world is a wild place. And like, as I think this kind of goes full circle to what Danielle said, like, what can you do? Like, keep yourself safe, keep your friends safe, keep your family safe, like look out for each other.
And trust just to piggyback off that, trust your instincts. I think that's like one of the things a lot of us have been taught as women and like pre-programmed out, that like, you don't want to look rude, but if you are getting any type of feeling that like someone is making you feel uncomfortable, it's okay if you look rude, like get out of there. Like, it doesn't matter. You are like, your instincts, the way I explain it often to clients is like, we are picking up millions of pieces of data that we don't necessarily can verbalize. And so if your instincts are like the hair on the back of your neck is going up or your arms, like that's your body picking up on something that you may not be able to verbalize. So don't doubt it. Just go with it.
Yeah. Listen to it. Keep yourself safe. And hug your friends and family extra close, I think is what most of us are feeling this week when you're dealing with tragedy. So I think that's what most people are. There's a lot of stuff going around right now to raise some money and to kind of finish Liza's run. I think has been a lot of the thing going on there. So reach out to community, find a way to support each other. But I think we're gonna move on to some equally difficult, but hopefully good conversations. Transitioning out of that one into Keely put in actually kind of it is not dissimilar from the research you have been working on. But there's a new article that just came out, and I believe it's from the same individual that you're working that your own study has been run with, right?
Yep. Yeah. So Dr. Kelly Pritchett out of Central Washington University has been working with a couple other grad students on another survey-based study. This one was with Sophia Berg as the other main collaborator, looking at the self-reported history of eating disorders, training, weight control methods, and body satisfaction in elite female runners who competed in the 2020 U.S. Olympic marathon trials. So they actually targeted all 300 plus women who were in the trials to see if they wanted to complete this survey. They ended up getting around 146 females to complete the survey. So, about 50%, a little less than 50% of people decided to take the survey, which, is a step, but it's not great. But again, like you're targeting a very niche group of women. And so getting the buy-in is probably pretty tough, especially when it's a study around eating disorders. I feel like that's a big turn off to a lot of women because it does make us feel uncomfortable to be open about ourselves. But some of the things that came out of this were pretty interesting, at least to me. There again highlighted a very high prevalence of eating disorder in this group of women, with about a 33% prevalence rate, which is a lot higher than previous studies. But also, I think potentially eating disorders are getting more awareness. People are maybe willing to seek help and identify with having one. But it also could just be showing that this could be getting worse in female athletes. And so I think it is showing that it is very prevalent and we do need to be very concerned about it. But one thing else they found with these eating disorder participants is that those with eating disorders did have higher levels of body dissatisfaction, and those with higher body masses also had more dissatisfaction. But the cool thing, I guess, in this study is that there was no difference in performance based off any of these, right? So higher body mass women, lower body mass women, no difference in performance. Eating disorder, no difference in performance. And so these people are like focusing on changing their body, but at the end of the day, like their body size is letting them compete just as good as any other body size. And so it seems like hopefully with more and more studies coming out that are, going against past studies that were conducted on men that showcase, men at these lower weights are running faster than men at higher weights. Well, actually, it's not the case in women. Hopefully we'll start changing that narrative. So maybe people aren't being so critical of their body size because actually they're able to perform at their highest level regardless.
Yeah, that's a pretty important take-home message, I think. And I'm really curious to see what the trail community comes back with, because I think you guys asked a very similar set of questions. So curious to know, obviously very niche group, very select group there. I think the trail study is kind of much more broad as far as experience, age, gender, ability. So that will be.
Yeah, we got over 3,000 participants. So
that's a huge data set.
Yeah, it's amazing. So
yeah,
to come probably in a couple months, we'll get to talk about it. So
heck yeah. But you also added some more really kind of exciting news this past week. I'm so stoked with the sporting world right now. Yeah, the Lpga Tour. Can you fill us in kind of what's going on there?
Yeah, it seems like every week now there's another governing body of women's sports that are kind of following suit to the WNBA, which is really cool. And this week, one I found was to deal with the Lpga Tour, so women's golf. And this is P&G and Kroger partnering together to put on a Kroger Queen City Championship, which is just a huge golf tournament that they're going to host in Cincinnati. Cincinnati being chosen because it is a city that does need a little bit of help with female health or female sports and kind of providing to underrepresented females and women without means to be able to get into sport. And one of their goals, their mission of this program is to identify and support the next generation of game changers, so women's in sports, from both the corporate and entrepreneurial communities of Cincinnati. And one of their initiatives that I thought was really cool is to close the chore gap. And they're basically going to reach out to women in sport and their households and start providing a lot of education around how they can divvy up chores so that women don't have all of the house responsibilities that has been, kind of prominent in the past. They also have a family center at their tournament that will give moms space to pump, breastfeed, and all of those things so that they have a private, like very quiet place to do those things, which is awesome. And up until recently, I thought that was commonplace, but I was actually talking to one of my dear friends who was at an expo for her job, which was about all organic, natural foods and a very, very, very like progressive group. There was no space for her to pump at all. And so I think while this seems something that we should have done a long time ago and we should have at all of these big venues, I do think that this is a really good thing that they're adding this and making a point to show that they are.
Yeah, places for moms to feed and pump, but also like male or family changing rooms that are like or family bathrooms that have changing tables for kids, because that makes an automatic assumption, right? Well, to change a baby, you have to go to the women's bathroom to do that, and so making sure that that's available in all bathroom spaces. If they're going to be, particularly if they're going to be gendered, if you're not going to have gendered bathrooms, it makes it a lot easier. But in a lot of these areas, the bathrooms are still gendered outside of maybe a family restroom. And so making sure that there are things like changing tables in the men's bathroom is also equally important, because there's an assumption that dads aren't doing any of it, which doesn't set anyone up for success either. So hopefully there was a tweet that went out about that, I think at a big sporting event over the last 2 weeks as well. So hopefully something else to just slowly pick apart and improve for the sake of everyone trying to make it in this world, particularly if you're trying to make it while taking care of small children, which seems like just a feat of, I don't know, strength, brilliance, something like that. Okay. We're going to move on to the meat and potatoes today. But before we do that, we have to give a shout out to one of our other primary sponsors, one of the other brands making this possible, and that is The Feed. We've talked a lot about them over the course of the past couple of months. I think I get to order my September box here soon of new snacks, and I'm finally going to try some of the coffee that Keely has been recommending. And I'm wondering, Keely, if you've gotten anything new and exciting recently to up your snack game from The Feed.
So this last feed box, I got more coffee, so that doesn't count. But I also got no, I got the RX bar plant protein bars, so not the animal protein ones, but the plant ones, and I personally love them.
Cool.
They are less sugary and like sweet than the regular RX bars, and a lot less sticky, so the texture is like completely different. It's filled with pea protein and a couple other things, and I really like those a lot. And then I also tried a new kind of picky bar granola. It's like apple cinnamon cardamom.
Cool.
And yeah, it's basically like dessert. So that was my go-to post-dinner snack. It's supposed to be for breakfast, but it's post-dinner snack for me.
I think that's great. I love a little protein carbohydrate snack before bed to tide me over, get me through to the next morning, particularly as like you're training more on feet, I would say. You're kind of easing off the bike a little bit and getting back to running. And I'm sure that has kind of cranked everything up and make you feel like you're getting back into some normal training rhythm.
Yeah, definitely. It also like my body gets, one day I was just so sore. It's just, you go like 9 weeks without running and then you start running again and you still keep biking. Your body's just like, what are you doing? Like I've never felt that sore in my life. And it was just from running and biking. Like it's kind of crazy. A good reminder.
We're constantly beginners, but if you would like to try any of the products that are offered over at The Feed, you can go to www.thefeed.com, and there you can use code Trail Society 15 for 15% off your order. So go, I don't know, load up on your fill your pantry, get some new bars, get some new coffee, get something fun, try something new. So again, www.thefeed.com, and you can use our code Trail Society 15 to get some whole new snacks in your pantry to up your training game. But we're going to dive into the thick of it now, the thick of our show, because we've talked about super easy topics up until this point, right? So chill. What a chill, relaxing
really chill
show.
Episode.
That's kind of my life. So I'm like, yeah, I feel comfortable with this.
So chill. We just mentioned that Keely is recovering from an injury. I am back home stateside. I bailed on Europe 2.5 weeks early to come see my PT to kind of get stuff dialed. Danielle, you've had COVID twice, I think. You got the double whammy.
Yeah, I got rebound COVID. It's a thing.
So the three of us are just doing really, really awesome. And so when we realized that Hilly couldn't join us today, we're like, you know what? We got to have Danielle on to talk about the mental side of injuries and coping with our identity in sport. And so you're here today to help fix us, I think.
Well, first of all, you guys don't need fixing. You're just a part of being human is grieving and learning how to manage disappointment.
Yes.
If, just a reminder, I think that a lot of times this happens when we experience negative emotions is like, there's something wrong with us feeling this way when, I don't know, I look at my training schedule and I put so much time and effort and passion into this crazy sport. And I think about how much we like dial in to make it as perfect as possible. And then the things that can happen that are just so incredibly out of our control. And then, wanting to play off that it's not a big deal when the reality is like, yeah, maybe how we place doesn't have to emphasize how strong we are as much as we like put that attention on it. But in reality, like not being able to carry out something that you love in a plan is disappointing and it sucks. And I think it's really important to just like honor that piece of it. Like it's hard. So welcome to being human. Glad you could join us.
Totally.
Oh, it's hard being human.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for like the first couple of years of my like athletic career, I felt really embarrassed that I put so much into my self-worth as an athlete, right? It was like trying to hide it from everyone was like, oh yeah, well, I feel okay. I feel fine. Like I'm not allowed to feel upset because I can't run because running is like a privilege and running is all these great things. And it's something I choose to do. But at the end of the day, like it is something we put all of ourselves into for a long amount of time. And we put like all of our mental energy into that. And so I think when it is taken away from us, it's really, really hard. And I think I've finally gotten to the point where I've acknowledged that I'm allowed to grieve that I don't have it anymore, but definitely took me a really long time. And it still feels kind of uncomfortable. It feels kind of silly because you're like, this is just running.
I mean, I think it kind of comes, I say this a lot, I kind of feel like a broken record, but holding to emotions, like you can understand that it's a privileged mindset to have that we get to, adventure and do these awesome things. And also that it's really sad when we do struggle and experience these setbacks.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just all sitting in our emotions right now. We're just three people that are slowly fighting their way back to running and the sport they love and racing. I know that I think all of our calendars were kicked to the curb in a big way with this. And I think sitting in that unknown, like the unknown of the injury timeline is really hard. The unknown of like, do I keep things on the calendar is really hard. How can we think about, I mean, I think that you've had to go through this too with rebound COVID is like, how can individuals, have, sit with the unknown and feel not necessarily comforted by it, but like, how can we better work with it? Just because you can't rush it. You have to be patient. And that's so hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think that as a society, we often, I'm trying to think of the exact word that I want to use, but I think we often like hide away from disappointment. But what we don't recognize that like, even if we do our best to protect ourselves from disappointment, we're going to feel it at some level. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because it offers us the opportunity to look at opposites and kind of polarity of life. And without the good and bad, we don't really feel how good things can be. And, it's interesting as you're talking about this, I kind of recognize my own maladaptive coping skills where I never get too invested in any race. I like sign up for races really late just in case something bad happens. And then I'm never fully 100% invested in a race because I'm like, I don't know, all these things could happen. So I was supposed to run 10 away. I hope I said that right. 100. And I just like quickly pivoted and found a new 100 to run. So rather than kind of like even letting myself feel super disappointed about it, I was like, oh, well, there's another race. Not running it. I'm going to go to this next one. And I kind of like highlight that because I think it's it's really vulnerable and impressive when people are open to giving themselves 100% to a race. Because then you have to feel it versus, not ever really committing 100%. That's courageous.
That's super interesting too, to think of it in those ways of this, like, but it's putting yourself out there, right? To be like, okay, I'm doing this thing, I'm committing to it. And it's like, who knows what's going to happen in the in-between. And I think that to me relates to kind of the, like, it's not dissimilar from the process of trying to learn to trust your body again and trust yourself again. And it's like, that kind of sounds like you're stuck in that a little bit. It's like where you don't trust that, like, life is going to give you the, like, green light, the go ahead, even if it's not necessarily your body that's getting in the way, like you're worried that something else might get in the way between now and race day. And that's kind of, I think that's so similar to the idea of, like, I panicked during TDS. I was like, nope, don't trust my body. I'm out, done.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very like similar line of thought.
Yeah. I mean, and it's a way to like, all of these things that we've been talking about are a way to manage things that are out of our control, because it's really uncomfortable to sit in that, like, I don't know what this is going to look like, which is like kind of the history of most injuries of, like, we don't know what that's going to do. And ironically, one of the things that ultra running teaches us is how to problem solve in the moment and brainstorm and be adaptive. But up until we need to be that adaptive when we're out on the course or in that adventure, a lot of us are like white knuckling to try to keep everything as pristine and, perfect as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that was kind of me going into Western States, was like, okay, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm going all in. I'm controlling all of these things. Like, there's all of these things that are within my control, so I'm going to control them. And then it's like, oh, wait, there are certain things that we can't control in this sport. But when that happens, it almost makes you doubt everything, because then you're like, well, I just put my whole soul into this. I controlled everything I could have controlled, and it still didn't work. And so, like, for me, like, initially, as I thought the injury wasn't so bad, I felt okay. But then as soon as you find out that it's this, like, dilapidating injury that, like, technically could end your career, it's like, I almost felt like unmotivated to try again, because it's just so disheartening to be like, I'm going to build all the way back from this and then potentially have all of this happen again. And it's just so hard to trust that it won't happen. And it's hard to go on knowing that it could.
Yeah. You know what my take on that is? You know what I've decided to do moving towards 2023 is I'm just giving myself a bib season, where it's like, for the last so many years, I mean, pending COVID and a year where I was out with injury, it's like I've had like a big race or two big races a year, and those being like big hundreds. So it's really hard for me to race anything else in those lead ups. Like, even, I don't know, with life, it was hard to get to other races. And so it's like, you know what, like, I haven't done a 30K in a long time. I haven't done a VK in a long time. I haven't done a cross country race in a long time. And I'm excited to just, like, I think it's even harder when you're in the, like, the long ultra game, because you get so few opportunities to put yourself out there in a season. So it's like, you get like it's like having, I don't know, like a review of your performance at work. You get like one a year or two a year. I feel like that has served me well and not served me well in years past. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself lots of opportunities for success and lots of opportunities to fail. And it's like, it's not so much that I hope that I'm like awesome at all of it. It's just to, like, be able to have that opportunity to, like, put myself out there and get to experience those things and practice those things, as opposed to being like, okay, this is my one big race. It's all or nothing. It's this one thing. So that, like, I have other things to reflect on too. If for some reason something goes wrong down the road, it's kind of like, it's my new safety net. It's just, I'm just going to race a bunch of weird races and call it good.
It's kind of like a Danielle tactic. I feel like just sign up for a ton of them and you can't put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like so many different ways to do it. And one of the challenges I see with the athletes I work with and within myself, and just having this conversation, is this short, and I say this with love and compassion, but the short-sightedness of ultra running and like seasons that we define ourselves by these like individual races, and we define like who we are as a person by these moments in time, when like zooming out, this very small moment in time is not going to impact us long term if we let it, or if we don't let it. So like we get to decide how this moment is going to play into our narrative. So like, you know, Keely and I have talked about this a lot, is that as a society, we like to tell stories of people who are like successful and like the beautiful princess story, or the beautiful like race where the person wins after they've been really injured. But we like don't talk about the injury. We don't talk about like, I don't know, princess story. We don't talk about the hardship of all the people I guess she dated before. I don't really know a lot of princess stories, but that came to my mind. Whereas like it doesn't have to be a negative. So like you have to feel the feelings of being disappointed and frustrated, but then you also get to establish a lot of growth opportunities from this hard time. And as much as I wish that hard times didn't equate growth, there are very few experiences I know of that, like, if you are not struggling, then you're learning. Like they kind of come hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, my ego took a huge hit, I feel like, with this injury. I think at first I was feeling okay because I was like, okay, you know what? This is fine. It wasn't in my control. This injury was kind of a freak thing. Like I have to give myself some slack. But then slowly, like as you continue to go soldiering on, you're realizing that like I had put a lot of myself into this and my confidence is just so crappy right now. And I feel like it took me a while to realize it was low. And then it took me a while to kind of climb out of that hole too, to realize like, okay, I can change this. I have the power to turn that around and to change my thought of myself. But like, it wasn't easy. But I actually I found a study while we were kind of talking about all this morning about athletes coping with injury. There's actually been a ton of research in this space, which is kind of cool. I don't know if it's talked about, but it should be, because as soon as I read it, I felt better. They basically were like, we studied a ton of professional male athletes, female athletes, footballers, all of these things. And a lot of the common things that I read through a lot of these studies that I will link here in the show notes was that everyone felt like decreased self-esteem, anxiety, stress, anger, disbelief. There weren't really that many positives. And they were all of these like roller coasters of emotions that everyone was pretty much like the same on. And none of this is talked about. And reading it made me feel a lot better because I was like, oh, this is what everybody goes through.
Yeah, you're not alone all of a sudden, right?
No, but it is not uncommon that, you know, the first thing that happens when someone gets injured is they isolate. Yeah. And so like so they're isolating, they're not getting outdoors, they're not getting the endorphins, most people that they're used to getting when they're exercising, and they're not talking about it. And that's like a recipe for depression. Mm-hmm. And so like, it makes sense that we struggle so much when we're injured, especially if this is our community.
Yeah. Dee, I loved when you got COVID kind of that second time we were on a walk in Boulder and you were like kind of walking me through your mindset progression of like, okay, I got COVID the first time. Let's reevaluate some training goals. Okay, I've been out longer than I thought. Oh, I got COVID a second time. Like, let's reevaluate all of this. And I feel like you came to a pretty good conclusion about like things outside of your control being very black or white almost to a degree, instead of something that's a lot more gray, and how that kind of gave you peace with the decision to not do the 100 and kind of pivot. And
yeah, I mean, one of the things I had a supervisor once tell me is like, we can't control the weather, but we can control how we dress for it. And I found that really meaningful because it's like, all right, here's this situation I have literally no control over. And anyone who knows me knows that I love control. And
don't we all?
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is like a common thread in us. And, I can fight it a lot, but like it's going to rain. And if I am fighting it, I'm not preparing for it. So I'm not bringing my good rain socks. I'm not bringing my rain jacket. I'm wasting precious time fighting something that is going to happen. There's this term in therapy called radical acceptance. It's not necessarily talking about weather, but I really appreciate it. And it's like, you don't have to agree with it, but you got to accept it because it's out of your control. And so the longer you have to process and you have to grieve, the longer you fight the injury or the loss or the race, you can't move forward. So I think it's really important to know that you can manage and control how you grow from it and how you do accept and think about it in the future.
Yeah, that kind of advances to the quote that the phrase my grandma always said was, there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing choices.
Yes.
With the idea being like, you can pack your galoshes, you can pack a rain jacket, like you can choose how you're going to deal with disappointment or deal with injury or deal with crappy weather. Right. Like, I think that's kind of what that book, like, to me, it's like, that's empowering. Like, there's still the unknown. There's still the things that I can't control inherently, but I can choose to so when I did biathlon, weather was really important, right? You come into the shooting range, it could be really, really windy, and that kind of sucks. Like, and it's like, it's just bad luck. And so my coach always said, you can't control the weather, but you can control what time you go to bed. You can control what you have for dinner, and you can control taking care of yourself. Like, you have control over those things. And just kind of like relinquishing control on the rest of it. And I think there's a lot of, lessons that I've been able to take from that mindset and apply directly to the unknown injury timeline that feels just so out of your control.
I also think you can control your attitude, which can be really difficult, but you can cry the entire time it's raining, or you can be like, all right, what is the rain going to bring for me? And it's not like you're not annoyed by the rain, but at the same time, at a certain point, there's this option to be like, all right, I'm like, it's time to move forward.
And as 3 women who spend a lot of time in the Pacific Northwest, you have to just embrace the rain a little bit.
You can still bitch about it, but it's going to happen.
It's going to happen. You got to put your Gore-Tex shoes on and go for a run anyway.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though, talking about control, because I think you can have too strong of a sense of control when you are injured as well. I noticed little tendencies of myself kind of start to flare up when I was, really trying to control everything, because you can start to divert towards negative things you used to do, right? Like, you're trying to control what you're eating to a T. You're trying to control everything that you're doing to a T, which is a really negative trajectory. And you don't want to go that way, because that's just going to spiral you back to where you were before. But I find that it's easy to get into that control mindset into that control mindset a little bit too far as well when you are injured, because you don't have anything else to do and your sense of worth is kind of down. So you're like, okay, well, what can I control right now? Because I can't zoom out. I'm too fixated on what's going on in me in this short term. So what can I control right here? And that's kind of a tricky battle too. And so I feel like being cognizant of your sense of control and how that control can help you, but also being cognizant that that sense of control can also be your demise is really important differentiation.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I do think that not 100%, but the type of people that are attracted to this sport, I think sometimes people are like, oh yeah, trail runners are really relaxed. And I do think there are relaxed trail runners, but I think there are also a lot of trail runners who are very committed to training and kind of downplay it and kind of use running as a way to manage a lot of unknowns and symptoms of stress and anxiety and mental health. And, what can happen, we can think we're doing really well in life, and we may not even realize how we depend on certain elements of our sport to be healthy. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes, I know that happened to me during COVID when I stopped moving as much. I was like, oh, my relationship with my body isn't as healthy as I think because I haven't been stopping to check in with it. Mm-hmm. And so that's an uncomfortable realization, but also a positive of like injuries force us to stop and reevaluate our relationship with our mental health and with our sport.
Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of something my therapist had said when we were chatting about this as well, is she was like, we're all doing pretty well when things are going well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like it's like take something to kind of derail you a bit to kind of open back up those wounds and make you take a look inside and accept that maybe you're not doing great. And then you can work on it.
Or that you've started to depend on things or like got stuck in old patterns of behavior that make you feel safe, that maybe don't serve you the best long term.
And Danielle had helped me kind of write an article for Freetrail. You guys can pop over and read it about DNF, because DNF is kind of top of mind right now.
Oh, heck.
Danielle had a DNS, but Corinne and I have recently had DNFs at our 2 major races. And, DNFs aren't very fun, but they are super common in this sport. And like what we're demanding of our body is extreme. And most likely in our career as an ultra trail athlete, we're going to experience a DNF. And they're not very fun, but I think there's a lot of ways we can start to cope on them. And Dee helped me a lot with this. And she also assisted in this article. And I'm just going to kind of kick it off with one of her quotes. She says, DNFs are challenging because we care a lot. And it's disappointing when we give our all and it doesn't turn out the way we want. But we become stronger runners by working through missteps. Failure isn't a bad thing. It's an opportunity for growth. Ultra running is a game of longevity and strong foundation. Every time we experience failure, we get another opportunity to rise up, to rise above.
Wow, I sound very profound.
Right?
You are
Good
profound.
work, Danielle.
You wrote that. Those are your words.
But it's so true. Like, I think you can dwell on the DNF as like a way that you failed and kind of leave it at that. But if you can somehow transition your mental status to viewing it in the positive light, it's just going to be so helpful. So can you walk us through some of the ways you talk with clients, Danielle, or maybe you talk us through a DNF or something that didn't happen the way you wanted it to?
Yeah. I mean, I think we've started to talk about it a little bit before, but giving yourself time to be human and feel that grief and loss is really appropriate. It is like the number one step that we feel guilty about, and it keeps us stuck. So if you are fighting radical acceptance, you can't move forward. You have to feel sad. Like sadness is not a bad thing. And the more, like that's number one, feel it. Then give yourself a time limit. So like this is a really important part of DNFs in my perspective, is making sure that you aren't prolonging the grief. So putting it kind of into appropriate terms. So you had a DNF, let's say, and you're not injured. If you're still thinking about it in 2 months, it might be a red flag that it's time to get some extra support outside, because it already happened, and you have to start to move forward with it. You can't continue to grasp onto something that has happened and you can heal from. And one of the things that I often think about with DNFs is when we are in a comfort zone and we are never challenging ourselves, then we never push our limits or our boundaries, and we're always comfortable. But as humans and as athletes, the goal is really to find a balance between being in our comfortable zone and being so uncomfortable we can't function. We want to find like that perfect middle ground that challenges enough. But what happens when we're in that middle ground? Sometimes we fail because we are asking ourselves to do some really hard things. Like the amount of, it's so funny, but the adage of like, I don't even want to drive my car that far, or it's so cold out, what are you doing? Or whatever it is. Like, yeah, that is what we're doing. And it is really challenging. So DNF is just part of the sport. And it's important to recognize that if you are choosing to push yourself in a safe way, DNFs are going to help us like move forward, but also help us understand our limits and where we need to grow and where we need to, I don't know. Let's take that part out where I said, I don't know. Basically, just we need to grow.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I feel like DNFs can also show us, they can also highlight our weaknesses, right? Because if we're unwilling to DNF at all costs, then we're putting ourselves through harm for no reason. But, you know, if we're willing to DNF because it keeps ourselves healthier, it gives us that longevity that we're searching for in sport, then I think that's kind of a badge of honor of a DNF.
Yeah, well, I think it's easy. People are like, "Oh, if I DNF, like it's going to be so much easier to DNF again." And it's like, no, I don't think so, because I think we should like that whole death before DNF mentality needs to be checked at the door or gate or something of that nature. I don't think it has any space in any of our lives. It shouldn't be given any space in any of our lives. It's not. I don't think it's a good mentality to try to. It's not a good mentality, and it's not a healthy mentality.
It's dangerous. It's not teaching us a strong relationship with our body or our like, you can be, one of the things I work with a lot of athletes on is that you can be a really tough runner and still know when it's time to call it.
Yeah, 100%. It doesn't make you weaker. It doesn't make you less tough to know when to quit. Knowing when to quit is a skill. And honestly, a strength. I think that a lot of runners are afraid to kind of work and flex that muscle.
Totally. Because if you keep pushing yourself to the point where you can't compete anymore, or you're going to be out for a year, like that's not finesse. And as runners, we really need a level of finesse. And I am always saying, like, no one race should define your career, should define who you are. And when we kind of have these death before DNFs, that implements and like produces runners who are always trying to prove themselves.
Yeah, which is, I don't know, not a fun way to live. I would say. I definitely know people in our sport like that, have friends like that, have once been like that. And I would say it's come to this side of the sport. It's really, I think it's fun to recognize that, you know, it's a lot easier to enjoy the sport and enjoy what I get to do in this sport, being on this side of things now, being on a side of, I wouldn't say it's maturity per se, because I don't think that is necessary, but I think it's, you know, knowing that I expect a lot from my body, but I also have to respect my body or my mind. You know, DNFs are not always physical. They can be because your well is empty and dry, and, you know, going to that well emotionally, even if you're physically okay, that can be, you know, that's one of the races that was the hardest on me ever was finishing the North Face 50 mile in 2017. I want to say, like, I didn't know that I could quit. I didn't have a ride home. And I was like, well, the easiest way for me, because I didn't live in San Francisco yet, is the easiest way for me to get back to where I'm supposed to be is to go to the finish. And it was physically really hard on me, but it was emotionally really hard on me. And it took a long time to recover from that. Yeah. Not because of the physicality of the race, but because of the depths I had to go to just to make it to the finish line. There were years running in San Francisco where I was like, I think I've cried on every single one of these hills. And it was all from that one race experience. And so it's like, there's no official reason why you should DNF. I think a lot of us talk about like, well, if you're going to hurt yourself, that's a reason to get yourself off that race course. But emotionally, the well can just be dry. And that is something that you need to really check in with yourself on, because can be equally damaging.
Yeah, this is something that we're doing, even if you're doing it professionally, because you enjoy it. I mean, I think it's really difficult when you're a professional runner and it is kind of mixed between it being your source of income, but also something you're doing for fun. However, when I like zoom out in like professions, if you are miserable going to work every single day, you'd probably take a mental health day. You'd want to take care of yourself.
Yeah, totally. At least recently you would. Up until now, I feel like that was never really an option. But
Yeah. And I just like kind of to step back for a second. One thing that I like to say is that you can still hold yourself accountable and train really hard and push really hard and be compassionate. And I think that that's one of the things that we talk about as athletes and struggle with is that like becoming soft means I'm not going to hold myself accountable. And that's just not true. You can be compassionate and accountable. So
yeah, it turns out you can be more than one thing at a
weird.
time. That's the conversation I've had about a lot of things recently. It turns out you can be more than one thing at a time, professionally, emotionally.
Yeah. You can love cookies and ice cream. You don't have to just choose one.
You don't have to choose one. So I guess to kind of round out this conversation about DNFs, if someone listening to this has recently had their own DNF, be it due to injury or pending injury or whatever it might be, the well being empty, the spirit sponge being dry, whatever it might be, what are some words of advice that they can take away with them to try to help them into whatever the next chapter of this season or next season is for them?
Honor it. It's not going to last forever. Give yourself some space. I think that, that's something I've been saying a lot in this podcast thus far is that give yourself space to feel the emotions. But if we don't let ourselves feel, our body holds on to those emotions and that loss. And one of the ways that we are able to take and release it is through feeling it and talking about it. It's interesting. Animals, after they experience a big trauma, they shake. And so like a deer being chased by a lion, if they like make it out alive, the deer actually all huddle together and they like let themselves shake together to help their like bodies regulate and release the emotions.
Sounds like dogs shake. Dogs shake off all the time.
Yeah, dogs are shaking off their energy. It like helps ground them. And our form of shaking is through processing and talking about it. So basically, we aren't able to move forward and grow if we don't shake.
I would thought you were about to tell me that I was just allowed to have dance parties whenever
yes,
emotionally
shake
process
it off.
Something.
Actually, it is really good for our bodies to move. So shake it off.
Move and talk.
In the words of Taylor Swift, shake it off.
Shake it off. I love that so much. I think we're going to round out or leave our conversation on DNFs there for today. But before we let Danielle go, we're going to go through some Society Slams. Again, Society Slam is brought to you by Oura Ring. I'm really, really happy to have them on board as a partner this year. And that'd be something to slide into our DMs about. Let us know if you've got questions about using something like Oura Ring, using something like Oura Ring in conjunction with something like Natural Cycles for birth control. We are kind of uber nerds over here at Trail Society. So, slide into our DMs. Let us ask us your questions. We've got some things to think about.
And we're going to be, this is going to be news to Corinne too, but we're going to be partnering with Natural Cycles with our Oura Rings to test it out for them as well. So we'll get to provide all sorts of insights on Natural Cycles for you guys as well.
That's super, super exciting.
Yeah. So cool.
I've been talking it up to everyone. So this makes me feel extra special.
Oh, me too. I've talked it up so much now that JT can describe it.
Yes. Perfect. The men are on board. This is what we've been aiming for the entire time. Okay. Keely, you've got a Society Slam. I'll read Hilly's Society Slam, and then my Society Slam will be adding to your Society Slam.
Cool.
Hit us.
So I had an athlete run the Cairns 120 kilometer race this past weekend in North Queensland, Australia. And she sent me some stats beforehand showing that they had actually over half of their participants register as female. And so they were actually short on singlets for females because they had gauged all their participation numbers off of previous races. And they were shocked at how many women signed up for this one. She says it's like a super welcoming race because it has a lot of different trail distances. So it's not just all 120 kilometers. And so she thinks a lot of the runners were there, but just a really cool number to throw out there that, Australia's getting some women into trail running and they really showed up.
This tracks against their other races as well. So UTMB World Series is working with she used to be in charge of the Ultra World Tour, Marion.
Oh, Marie Simmons?
Yeah. So she's kind of been tasked with trying to help increase participation of women within the UTMB World Series as well. I think that is actually part of the reason why they added the ETC this year, that Explore Courmayeur race, to add another kind of introductory race. And we saw this at the Rut this weekend. It had about 50% participation. And that was because if you look across all the races, it helps to average out to the longer distances. That's what happened here at the Cairns 120K. It's what's happening at Tarawera in New Zealand. And it's what's happening at Ultra Trail Australia, in Australia, where they're having upwards of 20 to 30% women compete in the longest distances, which is a little bit better than what we have going definitely in Europe and for sure in the US as well. But adding races like a 20K, like a 50K, like a 20K, like a half marathon-ish distance, those races do bring in a wider range of participants and greatly improves the number of female participants in a race weekend. And so it's a way to get people into the sport, to welcome them into the community, and for them to kind of move up in race distances year after year. So that is supported by a bunch of other races, particularly happening in Australia and New Zealand. But the Rut numbers were very similar to that as well, with the 11K in the mix, with the VK and the 11K. So that's super, super cool to see. So that's kind of me just piggybacking for my Society Slam.
It's fine.
I was helping Zoe over at Trail Runner with an article about UTMB women's participation. So that's where those numbers are coming from. And then Hillary left Society Slam for us. And it was from IG, from a listener who wrote in. And she said, I listened to you, Corinne, and Keely on the podcast whenever it comes out. You three have inspired me as a runner. I started running back in 2017 because someone told me I didn't look athletic. Shame. I'm adding my own words here. Shame on whoever told her that, or whoever told them that. So I wanted to prove them wrong. I fell in love with running in the process. You all inspire me to reach for my dreams and fuel better as well. Watching you finish UTMB gives me that little addition of courage to go for it. Thank you all for being exactly who you are and keep crushing it. And the outpouring of love for kind of our vulnerability, which I say is not vulnerability, it's authenticity. I am who I am, be that vulnerable or otherwise. And so it's been really, you all are a very supportive community. And it's really, really cool that is the community that we've grown with Trail Society, is one of inclusion and one of community. And we hope to continue to grow that in the months to come. I think that's it for us this week. Danielle, any last words you want to impart on our listeners?
I'm just still have Shake It Off in my head. So I think I'm going to remind everyone to just keep shaking it off.
So with that, keep shaking it off, slide into our DMs with questions, with words of support, with words of criticism, whatever you got. And until next time, we'll see you out on the trail.